Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and after having a much-needed break with last week's episode and really trying to focus on taking care of myself just over this last weekend, I think it is time to jump into a much more complicated topic. And this is the topic of spiral dynamics. Now, spiral dynamics is something that I learned about, I can't even remember when. It was over 5 years ago, somewhere between 4 or 5 years ago. And it was something that I first heard from Rob Bell when he was interviewing. I think he had like a couple episodes talking about it, and then he had one of his sons come on and they went into it much deeper. I'd never heard of this concept before. And spiral dynamics is a way to really dive deeper into how people act and just kind of respond to the world around them. And as soon as we start getting into this, it's probably going to make more sense. At least that's my hope. At the same time, this is just an overview. If this is something that you would like to hear more about in the future, then please let me know. On YouTube, leave a comment, send me an email to questions.btcpod@gmail.com, and let me know if you would like for me to go into this a little deeper. Though I also do encourage you to look into this yourself as well, because there is a plethora of information out there. Now, let's get into the overview of this psychological complex of spiral dynamics. This was actually something that came about around the same time as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this was actually created by a psychologist named Claire W. Graves. And she was trying to come up with a way to examine what makes people different in their behaviors, values, and worldviews. So there are 8 stages to spiral dynamics. And as the spiral works its way upward, and the different stages are associated with colors and just a rudimentary title to demonstrate what is going on within this stage. So to start us off, we are going to start on the beige phase, or the beige stage of spiral dynamics. This is also known as the instinctive self, and it's described as being instinctive. This is survival at its best. We are driven pretty much just by the very archaic modes of our brains, the very lower order of our brains, where it is just about survival. It is about meeting our basic needs. There's not a whole lot of complex thought that is taking place here. And one of the websites that I'm looking at for this, they actually list these different stages, and they actually found statistics from the next evolution on what is the population that still is within this certain stage. So the beige stage is survival. It's instinctive. It's automatic. It is reflective. And this is how we have survived from the very beginning as a species. Today, roughly a tenth of a percent of the current world population is within this beige area, or the stage of spiral dynamics. And this is like I would say this is probably much more common within the realms of, say, uh, isolated tribes that don't have much interaction with modern society today. This is almost, I would kind of describe this as like the caveman era of our species. We are just doing the bare minimum to survive. Where are we going to sleep? What are we going to eat? Where are we going to get the water that we need? And who are we going to mate with in order to continue our species? That's the beige. Now, from beige, we move up the spiral to purple. And purple is animistic. It is also referred to as the magical self. And this is where you start to see tribalism take place. In this stage, in the purple stage, we are looking for safety and security. This is where you're going to see a lot of rituals that take place for the protection of a tribe. This is where things are magical, where things are mystical. We do not know a whole lot of what is working to make the world happen and how we interact with the world the way that we are. And therefore, we develop these rituals in order to make the spirits happy. This is one where the security comes from joining into a group and following the leader, which is oftentimes like the spiritual authority. This would be something akin to having the tribal shaman who can communicate and intercede on our behalf for the spirits, or intercede on to the spirits for our benefit. This is where you're going to have dances and rituals and ceremonies in order to make things happen the way that you expect them to, or that you want them to, because there is something outside of who we are, outside of what we can see, outside of what we can do, that is going to influence the world around us. And we are, as you can see, compared to the beige, we're starting to get a little bit of an understanding of what makes the world work. It is a very primitive understanding. And this is something that evolved approximately 50,000 years ago, and about 10% of the current world population falls on this stage of spiral dynamics. And this is something that is likely more associated with stories that we heard of, like First Nations people, Native Americans, of tribes in Africa. This is even something that we can see within the biblical narratives of what happened during the Copper Age. How, like, I think about all of the rituals and rules that were put in place by God for the Israelite tribes in order to set them apart. And if they did everything according to these rules, like they offered the proper sacrifices, they honored the various celebrations at their appropriate times, they what are some of the others? Some of the others they didn't do were like allowing fields to not be used 1 out of 7 years in order for them to regain some of their nutrients so that they could produce more. This is where we're noticing trends about cleanliness. But this is definitely the stage where we notice a definitive understanding that there are otherworldly beings in the world. And if we do things that upset them, bad things are going to happen to us. If we do things that are going to appease them, that are going to delight them, then that is something that will bring about their blessing on us. And there are a lot of religious beliefs that come from this phase of spiral dynamics. The next stage, as again, we're working our way up the spiral. We started out at beige, we went to purple, now we're into red. Red is the impulsive self. This is the dominant stage where we are trying to exert our power on the world and the people around us. So the impulsive self, or the red stage of spiral dynamics, it is driven by power, glory, rage, and revenge. This is where we're going to see things like the Viking sagas, where it's all about getting glory. It's all about something bad happens to me, therefore I have to go seek out revenge. And it just turns into this chaotic mess of violence and trying to achieve glory and honestly a blatant disrespect for life. This is the stage that believes it can get what it wants specifically by aligning itself with power. This power can come from an otherworldly deity. This is also power that can come from appeasing someone who has the machinations or has their hands on the controls of a society. This is following the person who has the biggest stick, because if I am on their side, then that means I'm going to win. It's actually, to a certain degree, very appropriate that the Republican Party is associated with the color red, because that's very much where they are right now. We're talking about people that are going for centristic desires. We're talking about impulsive self-gratification. We're talking about following a hierarchical power structure that starts at the top and it works its way down. Now, I have not been shy about my disdain for what is happening politically here within the United States. And one thing that can actually bring me a little bit of peace around this is this thought process, this way of interacting with the world is one that evolved approximately 10,000 years ago, and currently about 15 to 20% of the world population is in this stage. I mean, I was in this stage for the longest time. And it's nice to know that there is a distinct minority that are within this red stage. And yet we have also seen that the people that are in this stage are also some of the most violent. They are the most outspoken, and they are some of the individuals who seem to have much more of a vendetta against the world and are constantly looking out to find enemies wherever they are. The next stage, working up from red here in the spiral, is blue. This is the role self. And this is also it's also called the authoritarian. Now, in this one, the blue ultimately seeks peace, and it is locked in the battle of good and evil. Sound familiar? I guess I spoke out of turn when I was saying this was a part of the red. I guess it's more blue. But it is absolutistic. It is obedient, it is purposeful, and it is authoritarian. By following the rules of your given role, you will know the fundamental truth. And most religions and religious values are rooted in this stage. So life has meaning, it has direction, it has purpose with predetermined outcomes. And blue is very black and white thinking. Very black and white thinking. And there is only one right way to navigate the world. This is very conservative Christian beliefs. This is very... we can look at some of the older traditions within the Jewish belief system. We can take a look at Islam and very radical Islam. Honestly, some of these very powerful world religions have very rigid black and white thinking. And this is very blue of them. It is following rules, structures, and procedures, and listening to who is in charge. And a common thread with this, and tell me if this sounds familiar if you're like me who grew up in the Christian tradition, is if you do things right during this time, then you will be rewarded in the next life or in the next stage of our existence. Sounds a lot like what I hear a lot of people talking about regarding heaven. They have to do everything right during their lives now in order to get to this ultimate utopia of heaven. Very blue thinking. The blue stage of spiral dynamics and our understanding of the world, it evolved approximately 5,000 years ago, and about 35 to 40% of the current world fits within this population. Stark difference compared to the stages below it. And honestly, it is the one that has the highest percentage, which for me is a little unfortunate. Going back on what I shared about the red stage, is the blue here, where it's very black and white thinking, is where the majority of people in the world are. And these are also the people who are very, again, vocal. And because they know the right way, because of their black and white thinking, and they're the ones who have the right way in order to navigate the world, therefore everyone else needs to follow along with what they are saying needs to happen. Now, moving on from blue, we are looking at orange. Orange is the achiever self. And it is very achievist. No, I'm kind of a nice correlation there with those. In the orange stage, we are focusing on achievement, success, science, and it's very scientific and it's very strategic as well. It's materialistic, it is ambitious, and it's also very individualistic. In this stage, we are looking at the world as a game, and it is a game that we compete in, and we are trying to win. We are trying to win material pleasure, acquisition, and an advancement of civilization. We learn to excel at everything we do, setting and achieving goals and measuring success and so on. I think about the corporate world and how you are oftentimes supposed to come up with SMART goals. If you have these SMART goals, then you have these steps of how you can figure out whether or not you're achieving these goals, what's working, what's not, and ultimately you can figure out, am I winning at the game? So in this stage, power and money and success are the most valued, and we are seeking to live the good life with material abundance at all cost. Does that sound familiar? Here's some of the stats about it. This evolved approximately 300 years ago, and it is 25 to 30% of the world population. And here in the US, it is up to 50% of just the US population is right here. We are trying to achieve goals. We are trying to gain success. We're trying to gain the material status that it is that we deem to be the ultimate end goal status symbols that it's going to set us apart from others. This is the people who are working to get the latest and greatest gadgets, the newest iPhone. This is the people, I will put myself here. When the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X came out, I wanted to be one of the first to get my hands on it because they were the brand new ones, and I really wanted to have that status of being one of the first people to have one. And that was something that I did strive to become. So these are the people that are, again, very achievement and goal oriented, and it's very individualistic. I'm looking to get the next house, I'm looking to get the newest car, I'm looking to get the best paying job, I'm looking to have the most success that I can gain with the time that I have here. It does sound very American, doesn't it? And as much as I can still fall into this is one of those ones that really does drive me crazy about living in the United States, is because there is so much of a focus on trying to win. Win against what? Others? No, that's, if I'm personally not a fan of the whole dynamic of, if I am trying to win, then that means other people are losing. So this is a thought process and a way to navigate the world that became very dominant during the industrial age. The next stage in spiral dynamics is green. This is also known as the sensitive self. This is communitarian, if I can get my words out properly. This is one that focuses on the community. It's egalitarian, it's environmental, and it's personalistic. It is seeking inner and outer peace while being sensitive to others and the environment. This is where you get into what was ultimately the end goal of the, I forget what they call it now, but the project that we've had here since the founding of the United States, of pluralism, of being a pluralistic society. It is very sensitive, and it appreciates diverse views and focuses on the needs of the many. This is where I tend to find myself the most, and I'm hoping that's something that has come across in previous episodes, because this is where people become more aware of human and animal rights. This is where feminism came from, racial equality, postmodernism, and other movements. This is where liberalism and activism are expressed. And the underlying theme of this green stage is we are seeking peace within the inner self and explore the caring dimensions of community. Now, I do enjoy being here in the green stage because my community has very much grown from what it used to be. And this is, and so this stage evolved about 150 years ago, and about 10% of the world population is here within the green stage, and it makes up about 20% of the population here in the US. And when, oh gosh, a couple of years ago when I was listening to Rob Bell and his son, I think it was Trace, were talking about this. They were starting to see like a swing where more people were moving out of some of these earlier stages and coming more into the green stage. And ultimately that's kind of where we need to go, because we are living in such an interconnected world, so much more connected than it has ever been. It is valuable for us to become sensitive to others and their different experiences and views in the world. Now, again, this is a pretty complex topic here, and to make it even more complex, we're now going to add some tiers to this. Everything beige, purple, red, blue, orange, and green, these first 6 phases or stages, these are tier 1 levels of human development of our value system. Once you move beyond green into the final 2, or I'm assuming the final 2, it could be that more is determined later as we continue to evolve. These become second tier. And once you hit the second tier, and this is kind of important here, you begin to have a much better appreciation of all of the tiers that came lower on the spiral. And I will admit, this is an area that I do struggle with, because it is very hard for me to look at people who are authoritarian, who are just power hungry, who are very individualistic and materialistic and just trying to get ahead of everyone else, regardless of how that impacts others. It's hard for me to look at them and be sympathetic, because I often forget that's how I used to be. So it's like my next stage would be moving from green into the next one, which is yellow. And once I get there, I would have a much better understanding and appreciation of everyone and all of the work that led me up to this stage. So now we are looking at yellow, which is the integral self. It is also systemic. It is called systemic. And this is where we are looking at being integrative. We're looking to have similar synergy, and we're looking at the big picture view of the world. And it is a realization that everything is interconnected and part of a system. This is something that you take a look at how, like, global warming and that kind of stuff is happening. You take a look at how we have come so close to eradicating certain diseases with the work that we've done with vaccines, because we understand how these systems work. We understand how interconnected everything is. The earth itself is one large dynamic system. I am reminded, I guess this was back in 2020, everything that was going on with the pandemic and everything, but over here in Washington, there was also a fear of murder hornets, also known as Asian giant hornets. And this was something where, invasive species. It makes me think of a story that I heard about people trying to get in on the silk trade here in the US. And they brought in a very specific kind of moth that I actually did a little research so I could call them something other than what they were known as, because it's a derogatory term. It's from a family of moths, It's called the Lamantria dispar, and it's called the spongy moth, and along with a much more derogatory name. And these moths were brought over in order to bolster a silk trade here in the US, and they were an invasive species. They didn't do what we wanted them to do. They were just destroying the environment around them. In the yellow stage here of spiral dynamics, this is where we start to see that we are integrated into this system, and that there are many variables that are at play, and they can have a drastic impact on this system. The yellow people who are in the yellow stage, they live fully and responsibly as what we are and are learning to become. And this is one that learns and adapts and is capable of expanding or utilizing what it has learned from the previous stages. And this evolved about 50 years ago, and about 1% of the world population is here on this phase. And then the final phase is turquoise. This is also known as the holistic stage, or the holistic self. This is where we have compassion and harmony are the guiding virtues of the people in this stage. So this is the one that wishes to experience wholeness of our existence through all dynamics of us, physically, mentally, emotionally, maybe even spiritually. And this is one that tries to look at everything from all of the different views without privileging one in particular. So this area, or this stage, began expressing itself about 30 years ago. So I was 10 or 11, maybe 12 when this first started coming around. And about 0.1% of the world population. No, I said that wrong. I'm sorry. It is 0.01% of the world population is here in turquoise. Now, again, this was just a broad overview. Some of the things that we can take from this is that when we look at how people interact with others and with the world around them, we can see some very predictable patterns that take place. And this is something I find very important to mention here, until you get to the second tier of these stages, the seventh and the eighth stage of spiral dynamics, it is very common to look back at the stages before with contempt and disdain. Again, this is something that I wholly admit that I struggle with. I take a look at the people who are red and blue, and seeing the very conservative Christians, or not even just Christians, but the very conservative religious groups that are trying to create theocracies around the world, and see them as evil, as horrible people, see these individuals as being completely wrong and way off base and disconnected with the world around them. And I forget that that's where I was up until about 5 years ago. It's only been 5 years since I started deconstructing my faith. And having that kind of animosity for the people who are in the stages behind us, that's unfortunately very common when you're here in the first tier, like I am. And I wholly admit this is where I'm at. And it is important for us to continue to develop and change and improve ourselves so that we can continue moving through these different stages within this spiral. And if we can get a majority of the population, actually not even a majority, I forget, I forget what it was, but Rob and Trace, I think they had made mention of it only takes like about, I could be totally off base on this. It was either 10% or it was much smaller, of like a single percent of the population to start moving to make these changes to get people to move beyond where they are on this spiral. It's unfortunate that that pendulum does swing back and forth, and the people who are in the blue stage that are very authoritarian, these people are afraid of losing that power, because instead of everyone having equal say and equal power within this interconnected world that we find ourselves in, they would rather consolidate that power because they're afraid to lose it. They don't want anyone else to have the power because they're afraid of what people with this power are going to do. And one of the last things I'm going to say here is, the further up you move within the spiral, when you start getting towards green and yellow, this is where things move slowly. And the reason why is because there is so much more of a focus on making sure everyone is heard, that people don't want to make the decisions of where we're going to go, what we're going to do, what's the best way to navigate this situation. And so we do need to recognize, I guess, that there is still value in having the people who are unafraid to make the decisions. And we hope that they make the decisions with the full understanding of the impacts that that's going to have on others. Unfortunately, a lot of people in power right now, that's not where they're at. And it's a shame. It really is. That is a very rudimentary overview of spiral dynamics. I will share links of where I was looking for some of this information. And again, it's very easy to find books and online resources that talk about spiral dynamics. If this is something that you would like to have a much more in-depth discussion on, then please let me know. I can put in much more effort into researching and looking at each stage through a much more microscopic lens. And otherwise, we will be back again next week, and I'm looking forward to talking with you then. And I hope that everything is treating you well as we are nearing the end of May. And oh my goodness, June is just right around the corner. And so keep doing the best that you can. Hang in there. And until next time, live strong for today.